A good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the final round of the 909 Corse Touring Car UK Championship for the second half of 2023. Can you believe we are already here after 8 exhilarating rounds across some fantastic and often challenging British circuits? We round out the running for this season here at actually my local track, Oulton Park. So I can report not quite as warm here as the game would suggest. We're of course running as we often do in optimal track conditions, and yeah, I get the feeling at this precise moment in time, the rain and the cold, that the lap times wouldn't be quite as impressive as what we're seeing in this session so far. Leading those impressive lap times then, it is Alan Matthews with a 59.7 to his name, sees him currently on provisional pole with just over 5 minutes to go in this qualifying session. Behind him it's Barry Clayton, according to the timing system, with a 1 minute .305. Then we have Jack Hodson with a 1 minute .367. So a bit of a discrepancy there, I will confirm in the interval between the qualifying session and race 1 what the times are actually looking like, or it might be cleared up in the remaining few minutes of this session. In P3 with a really strong showing here at Oulton Park, it's Steve Knight with a very impressive indeed, a 1 minute .7. That is arguably his strongest qualifying showing of the year so far, and it will be possibly, well, in fact, it will be his strongest qualifying showing of this year. I'm still in denial that it's over. Unfortunately for Guy Swarbrick there, not a strong one so far. Running well in 5th position, but unfortunately for him, that session comes to a bit of an end there with a visit to an inside barrier there, which he'll have to try and get the car back into the pits, which he has done, and get some repairs, which he has done, and get back out on track, which he has done. We're on board now with Rosie Oliver. As we can see, leaves be flung about everywhere, and there'll be some more here as a little bit too hot into that looks to be, whereabouts are we on track? I can tell you we are just heading towards the penultimate corners where it all went wrong for Rosie Oliver there. And she gets back out on track now, heading around that final corner once again. I just want to give a mention actually to Alan Matthews, who's just smashed the previous personal best time. I say smashed, it was an improvement. It was a 59.615, sees him go even faster once again, cementing his position not only at the top of the championship standings, but also of this qualifying session as well. We are, of course, on the smaller island. Apologies, not the island loop being the form. We're, of course, on the smaller Foster's circuit, which is a little bit more truncated, gives you a shorter lap. And what a short lap it is. It's 59.6, as we've already mentioned, for provisional pole here. So I imagine we'll be hovering around when the fuel loads get a little bit lighter and the tyres haven't completely given up yet, the low 1 minute region, which means we expect a 24, 25, maybe 26 lap race here this evening, probably the latter two, which is going to be very interesting indeed. It's always interesting going to a slightly shorter track. It does change up things ever so slightly, because when we visit a shorter track, it often makes these, well, in comparison to other race cars, not the most capable cars in the world. They're not the most capable, they're also quite big and quite heavy. So put that on a very narrow track, we could have, I imagine with so many cars, well I say so many cars, with 7 cars running this evening, it's going to be close running, that is for sure. As we have still Barry Clayton, according to the timing system at least, holds P2 in this session, as Rosie Oliver, unfortunately, another big off for Rosie. Where was that? That was on the exit of Cascades by the looks of things. And that is not ideal this late on in the qualifying session. Luckily, as we were talking about though, that short lap should mean she should be able to jump straight back into the pit, straight back out, and maybe get another lap or two in with 3 minutes to go. And there is Jack Hodson with a mighty impressive lap there. A 59.9 sees him the second car now into the sub 60 second region. They're only by 500th of a second, but still within the 60 second region there, as we're on board with him now as it comes towards the halfway point of this lap. Interesting is the Foster's circuit, because you're going to get 2 sectors, which is a bit of a rarity, of course, on any racing track, although a little bit more common on a club level British circuit, of course. And what that means is you'd expect maybe about 20-second sector for one, and then a 25, maybe a 35-second sector for the other. No, it's 47 seconds. 47 seconds. I'll try and get my words out once again, as Jack Oulton has a small lock up there. It is 47 seconds for the first sector, and then just 12 for the second. So what makes it even more impressive is that by going purple in the second sector on the last lap, Jack Oulton was able to improve that. He actually lost time in the first sector, the big one where you have most of the corners, and with just that final corner, who's able to make a substantial enough difference to catapult him into that sub 60-second range there. So an impressive late lap performance for Jack Oulton. I'm not sure that tells us too much about his car performance, with it just being the one corner, but I imagine drivers this evening running a slightly lower downforce setup than what we might be expecting. Maybe putting a click or two of wing, maybe a little bit of camber, and then a little bit of lower tyre pressure in order to keep tyre temperatures happy. Maybe a little bit of oversteer creeping in through some corners. We haven't seen too much of that so far this evening, but if that is the case, then that will be helping keep the tyre temps up as well. Obviously at the risk of facing the wrong direction, as Rosie can attest to. It's not ideal in qualifying, as on cue there. I am very sorry, Rosie. Another issue onto the entry of Cascades. Just seems to be Rosie not gelling with Cascades this evening. That was very much on cue, so I will take the blame for that one. But as we enter now our final minute, our final chance ready for drivers to get across that start-finish line and start their last attempt here in qualifying. Predicted in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen there, you can see a 59.64 Alan Matthews. He doesn't need to improve on that too much because he already holds the original pole, but if he can, it'll be even more security for him. Occasional glimpses of 59.5 there from Alan, but I don't think at this stage in the session we're looking to improve. And a very late entry from Matt Daly, which is great to see because that spices up the championship a little bit more. But he, of course, won't have the opportunity to qualify in this session. So he puts himself at the back end of the field, which, having done some Sunday fun races with him now, I suspect could be somewhat intentional. We all know Matt Daly has some fantastic pace. So he puts himself at the back of the grid here. It gives everyone else a bit more of a fair chance. As we see now, Alan Matthews will be crossing the line for one final time here. Does he improve that time around? No, he doesn't. He doesn't need to, though. Guy Swarbrick crossing the line next. He stays 1 minute 1.365. And then we have Jack Oulton coming across the line now. Can he improve? No, he doesn't, unfortunately. Pushing perhaps a little bit too hard through some of the mini sectors on this lap. It's a 1 minute 0.9 for Jack Oulton, and he remains in P2. So it looks like, and in fact it will be, Alan Matthews on pole for the final race here at Oulton Park this evening. It's a Alan Matthews, Jack Oulton front row. Then we have Steve Knight with arguably his season best qualifying performance that I can remember, at least, alongside Rosie Oliver, with Guy Swarbrick and Paul Millman behind. Actually, Paul Millman a little bit lower than what we usually see from him these days. So I think we're going to have a very competitive midfield indeed. Of course, don't forget as well, Barry Clayton, who actually has qualified P3 according to the timing system, so bump everyone down a position there if he is able to take that position in the race start, of course. Barry Clayton P3, and then we have, obviously we're talking about Guy Swarbrick, Paul Millman, and then we have Matt Daly at the back end of the field as well, so a few drivers out of position, and I think with the odd overtaking opportunity that we have at this layout of Oulton Park, it should be a very interesting race indeed. So we'll catch you in a few minutes on the grid for the first race of the final round of this season. Don't go anywhere. And here we are, ladies and gentlemen, just over 30 seconds to go now until lights out on the grid for this first race of this evening. It is Alan Matthews, Jack Hodson on the front row, Barry Clayton, Steve Knight on the second, Rosie Oliver, Matt Daly on the third, and then Guy Swarbrick and Paul Millman rounding out the field on that fourth row. Just under 30 seconds to go now, and I think this will be a very exciting race indeed. Head down, of course, into the first right-hander, the Old Hall corner, before you run basically down towards Cascades, then a very high-speed circuit by nature. Lots of heavy braking zones in these front-wheel drive cars could cause all sorts of chaos with cars barreling into the corners. It is 6 red lights on the gantry, though, and we are away. As it looks to be a relatively clean getaway for everyone, in fact. Yes, that was. Congratulations, everyone, for that one. All with a good launch there, as we have Alan Matthews just about creeping out in front. Jack Hodson losing a position, potentially. No, just goes a little bit wide on the exit of the first corner. Meanwhile, it is Steve Knight and Matt Daly trading paint, as Matt Daly has the inside line for Cascades here, and still major contact between Steve Knight and Matt Daly. Actually, Steve Knight losing out big time there as a result. It's Matt Daly in P4 at the moment, Rosie Oliver in P5, and Steve Knight relegated to the bottom end of the field. A disastrous race start for him as he gets back on to the tarmac here. Meanwhile, Jack Hodson very much under pressure from Barry Clayton. Not really too concerned, I imagine, with what's going on in front of him. Alan Matthews, of course, now breaking away by about a second. He's very much under pressure, is Jack Hodson. Let's see now as we get back onto that start-finish straight already. Who's going to win out down the very short distances that we have to go full throttle at this circuit. Matt Daly, in the meanwhile, is already up into P4, climbed his way through half of the field just on the first lap. He is absolutely flying along, is Matt Daly. It's been the story of the season, really, hasn't it? He hasn't been able to attend every race this season, which is why his rival Alan Matthews is currently favourite in the championship standings. But we are now enjoying a battle between Jack Hodson and Barry Clayton. Jack Hodson have to go the long way around the outside of Cascades, as there's been a major impact between Guy Swarbrick, Paul Millman and Rosie Oliver. Guy Swarbrick really losing out in this one. He's still on the gravel and in the grass, and that is his hopes for this race pretty much dashed as he returns back to the pits. And what a disappointing end to this race and this season for Guy Swarbrick there. Meanwhile, Rosie Oliver wants to get back past Paul Millman, I'm sure, but everyone's going to have a little bit of damage here or there, I can imagine. Should mention, actually, as we see Matt Daly getting ahead of Barry Clayton, but does he? No, only just. Barry Clayton able to, I'll try that again, Barry Clayton able to keep a nose out in front as we head into that first corner. Once again, it's Matt Daly with the inside here, and can he squeeze him onto the grass? Yes, he can, and it is Matt Daly's corner there, up into P3 for the car in yellow. But Paul Millman, I should mention, on the medium compound of tyre, as he is looking to be overtaken by Rosie Oliver. And what was about? Oh dear, as there's contact between the two there. A bit of a tag there. I don't think Rosie saw that Paul Millman was still a little bit alongside there. These aren't the easiest cars in the world to see out of course, with the roll cage and the slightly small, if you drive Giulietta or Mito, slightly oddly shaped wing mirrors, shall we say? Shall we say? I've gone all Sean Connery on you. But I don't think Rosie was really expecting him to be there. Nothing that Paul Millman could do, really. What I was going to say is that Paul's losing this position, which he now hasn't, because the medium compound tyre, I suspect, might be stronger in the later stages of the race. But for now, you're going to want that grippier, soft compound tyre to give you a pace advantage and to get you into good position at the start of the race. Paul Millman was sacrificing that, as we saw, but luckily it's worked out for him. Let's see how he fares later on in the race. Will he have a bit more pace than the cars around him? Meanwhile, we're looking at Matt Daly up in P3 at the moment, but only just as Barry Clayton very much hot on his heels. And about a second half off the road is Jack Hodson. Jack Hodson, I imagine, is a little bit concerned at this point because he knows that Matt Daly is going to be able to at least keep control of Barry Clayton without sacrificing his own race pace. And sooner or later, there's going to be a battle between Jack Hodson and Matt Daly, I presume. I think the only driver who can feel a little bit more comfortable at this point in time is Alan Matthews. He's got about 3 seconds to the cars behind as he locks up into the final corner there. He doesn't have to worry too much just yet about any threats from behind. Meanwhile, we see Paul Millman currently in a little bit of no man's land here, running in P5. Rosie Oliver not too far behind once again. Will she have the pace to catch up? I think she will. Paul Millman, those medium compound tyres, by far and away the slowest car out on track at the moment, apart from Guy Swarbrick, who appears to have been able to rejoin, but has not been able to set a competitive lap so far, because after lap 1 it all went a little bit wrong, unfortunately for him. So apart from that, it's Paul Millman who was our slowest car out on track at this point in time, the only driver on the mediums in this race, and about half a second down on the rest of the cars. So I imagine Rosie Oliver will, sooner or later, for her sake, she'll want to do it sooner, but while she has the advantage of those tyres, putting the pressure on Paul Millman. Let's have a look once again at that battle for the podium. It is for P3, of course, and it is between Barry Clayton and Matt Daly. We've seen these two battle plenty of times before. The colourblind among you might struggle a little bit to determine which car is which, because they are very close, but they are very distinctive in their own special way. It is Matt Daly with the very bright yellow, and then it is Barry Clayton with the very bright highlighter green. That must, I imagine you have to turn your game exposure or your monitor brightness a little bit down in order to see, really, in that car. And I think if you've got the wrong type of visor on your helmet on a particularly sunny day, the car won't be that enjoyable to drive, as there is some lack of traffic to negotiate. Look a little bit messy as we headed in to the Cascades for a moment. We were able to keep control of it though, which is good to see. Such a shame to see Steve Knight's race become unravelled, and likewise Guy Swarbrick's as well. Such a shame to see Steve's race come undone in such a manner, given his strong qualifying effort here. He's clearly got some decent pace underneath him at this circuit. As we go back on board with Matt Daly once again, we're not seeing, I said 2 laps ago, and shock, Reeve's prediction for the race is wrong. That's never happened at all in the history of ever. Matt Daly is not able to catch straight back up to Jack Codson in the way that I thought he would have been able to. Instead, he's very much preoccupied with Barry Clayton behind, who gets a cleaner run out of the first corner there. They are now side by side. It's going to be Barry Clayton with the inside for the left-hander. They make contact on a very narrow part of the circuit, and Barry Clayton has to relent eventually. What an effort, though. Mighty fine battling between these two, using as much of the available tarmac on the circuit, because they need to in order to make 2 Giulietta WTCRs fit side by side here at Oulton Park. It's a bit crazy actually thinking of Oulton Park as I think of it as a big circuit. It's my biggest local track in Cheshire, and it's clearly still quite a small circuit that we're struggling at some point to get 2 cars too wide, as they are, even on a wider bit of the track, still making contact heading into that final braking zone into the large corner, and getting back onto the start-finish straight once again with one of my favourite name places of any circuit, Deer Leap. Big hill in the middle of the track, of course. Barry Clayton going wide out onto the grass. And these two are actually slowing themselves down with all of this battling. They don't have to worry about the 2 cars behind, at least unless they have some type of incident. And the 2 front runners are out in front now, so they're very much preoccupied with what's going on between these 2 cars. And this battle looks like it could be going on for a while. If we compare their pace, then it is Matt Daly with a best lap of a 1 minute 0.5, whereas Barry Clayton 1 minute 0.7. So they are very close indeed in terms of outright pace. But in terms of current pace, it's actually Barry Clayton, perhaps no surprise, who is winning out here by a tune of about 3/10. 1 minute 1.7 on the last lap for Matt Daly, and 1 minute 1.4 for Barry Clayton. Of course, if you're watching along at home, you can see the same timing data that I am seeing. Simply go to aroc.assetocorsaservers, it's all one word, .com/live-timing. So that's aroc.assetocorsaservers.com/live-timing. And you can jump in to the session that is currently live and have a look at what's going on, all of the drivers, all their best laps, all their deltas, and where they are on track as well. It's a very interesting little piece of data to follow along with. As we get back onto the start-finish straight, once again, Matt Daly goes a little bit wide. Apologies, not on the start-finish straight just yet. I saw a sea of cars on a back straight-ish bit, and thought we should have a look. Of course, there isn't really a straight to speak of at all on this circuit. It's very old-school British track, which is what we like, which is what has characterised this season so far, and what a season it has been. particularly for some drivers. So let's have a look at the championship standings while this impressive battle is going on, not just between Jack Oulton and Matt Daly, but also between Paul Millman and Rosie Oliver. As we see Jack Oulton going a little bit wide there. But at the moment it is Alan Matthews who leads the championship charge by 245 points. Sorry, he leads with 245 points. He's not quite... Oh dear, big impact between Steve Knight and Guy Swarbrick. And that has slightly put off our two drivers battling for the podium as they miss their braking zones. I imagine in attempts to avoid that incident. They get back on track. Steve Knight is able to get underway as well as they have to go through the escape road, of course. Luckily for these two, they get to carry on and enjoy their battle. The battle in terms of relative to themselves, they get to carry on as it were, with Matt Daly just in front of Barry Clayton. They have, however, unfortunately for them, lost a good chunk of time to Jack Oulton up in front, but they'll battle nonetheless. That could have been much nastier for these guys' races here, and I'm glad no impact came from that. But Alan Matthews, as we were saying, leads with 245 points to his name. Matt Daly 46 points down on 199. Matt Daly is the only driver who could have mathematically challenged Alan Matthews for the championship this evening. Of course, both drivers are present. We have less than 10 drivers out on track. It's going to be Alan Matthews who takes the championship this year, and what an impressive feat that has been from him. He's drove really well, actually. He's he's definitely made a step up from, I think, back to a couple of seasons ago when he was very clear top of the midfield. Now he's proven that he is more than top of the midfield. He is championship material. Yeah, Matt Daly, unfortunately, just didn't have an answer to him this season. As we see the car behind there, Barry Clayton, just looking in his rear view mirror, actually, you can just see in the braking zones, positioning the nose ever so slightly closer to the inside line of the corner, seeing if there's a Giulietta-sized gap that he can slot into. Hasn't been so far, but will there be this time around? We head into that first corner once again, side by side. Barry Clayton into the grass once again. This is like Groundhog Day. We've seen this before. As we watch now, heading into the middle part of the lap. I'm going to call it the middle part of the lap. Yes, I know the first sector doesn't end until the end of the lap, but it's the middle part of the lap to me, as we get back on to the normal racing line. And actually, Barry Clayton, fantastic overtake from him there, sees him currently in P3. To tune of about a second, actually, Matt Daly down in P4. Steve Knight then lap traffic once again. Hopefully no issues this time around. That's what Barry Clayton is hoping for, at least, as he wants to try and consolidate his podium just that little bit more. Meanwhile, we saw a battle being threatened before between Paul Millman and Rosie Oliver, and around the time of the incident involving Steve Knight, Guy, and the two drivers battling for the podium, we saw actually Rosie Oliver was only about 3/10 down on Paul Millman, and I thought, here we go then, this is Rosie's last chance to get the overtake done, and unfortunately I think that chance could have passed. Paul Millman halfway into this race, the medium compound tyres will be feeling good. They'll be certainly helping him out, although have they not there as we get onto the start-finish straight. Reverse commentator's curse potentially, as we see now, side by side. And it's going to be Paul with the inside line heading into this first corner. Rosie hanging it round the outside, actually goes off the track. Typical touring car line there, really. And it's Rosie who gets the position in the end. So you're welcome for that one, Rosie. See, Reeve's commentator's curse can be used for good. Not if you're Paul Millman, of course. Oh dear, there's contact. No, it is commentator's curse. That is, if ever I've seen a sign of it, apart from me murdering Alex Smith in the single season running at Sao Paulo, there is a very clear sign. Oh, and Matt Daly for that fact as well. A very clear sign of it. Rosie Oliver, unfortunately, small error there, 4 seconds down now, and you have to wonder, those soft compound tyres compared to the mediums at this stage in the race, will she have a pace advantage? Let's have a look on the last lap, because this lap, of course, will not be representative at all. Rosie posted a 109.9 there, so that doesn't look representative. I think Paul Millman and Rosie had an issue on the previous lap as well. As we see Matt Daly get ahead of Barry Clayton, and this is why Barry Clayton having a fairly major impact with what looks to be a tyre barrier, I think it was. 31 miles an hour he has damaged his front wing in an impact at that speed. that is not good. That's not what he needs at this stage in the race. He's now about 5 seconds down on Matt Daly with 10 minutes to go. You have to wonder whether this will be all he can settle for now. P4 after this. I just want to give mention to Guy Srawbrick on the super soft tyres. So let's see how they are working out for him. 101.5, not looking electric. Not sure if that's beaten his qualifying, but I imagine that's more down to the temperatures that the super soft are able to cope with. I imagine they are fairly toasty, especially with a little lock-up here or there. Meanwhile, we haven't seen him for too long in this race. It's Alan Matthews, our championship leader and a race leader as well. He's leading by about 13 seconds and enjoying his time out there, I think. Let's have a look at Jack Hodson as well. Likewise, started the race strong and was able to hold that P2. Big lock-up on the inside wheel there. A substantial lock-up, actually. I imagine his inside rear tyre won't be feeling particularly comfortable to drive on now, as Alan Matthews actually sets the best lap of the race so far and the first lap into the 59s. In fact, that was a 59.8, and if he'd posted that time in qualifying, he would have qualified on pole, beating Jack Hodson by about 1/10 of a second on the lap, as Barry Clayton and Steve Knight have further impacts. Their lap traffic, unfortunately, is always going to be tricky business at a narrow circuit like this. Steve Knight is able to continue on, and Barry Clayton, unfortunately, is banished to P4. Will he be able to get back on track before he has any cars near him? He will be able to, but only by about 5 seconds. This race really turning on its head for Barry Clayton then. Podium hopes completely dashed now. He now just needs to try and bring this car home, try and limp this car home for the final 10 minutes of this race. Matt Daly, meanwhile, is trying to do completely the opposite of that. He doesn't really care about caring about the car. He cares about pushing as hard as he can in order to try and catch up to Jack Hodson. In terms of their pace at the moment, on the last lap, it was Matt Daly with a 1:03 and Jack Hodson with a 1:02.3. So there's 2 seconds between Matt Daly and Jack Hodson, and their best laps are nigh on identical, only 600ths of a second separating them. It was a 1:02 and a 1:03. But Jack Hodson seems to be a little bit down on pace in comparison to Matt Daly at this point, and we have at least 8 laps to go in this race. So, you do the maths. About 2 seconds a lap, at least on the last time around, looking more like half a second a lap this time around. In fact, no, could be even better. We'll wait and see, as we are going to have Matt Daly and Jack Hodson crossing the line in the not too distant future. But you do the maths, and I think we're going to have a battle on our hands in the next few laps, and won't that be exciting as we now go on board with Jack Hodson heading into that final corner. We're going to have a lock-up. No, actually well controlled into the final corner. Gets back on the loud pedal over the deer leap and across the line in just a moment's time here. Predicted a 1:08, so a much stronger lap this time around for Jack Hodson, but I think Matt Daly could be about to beat that. He is going to beat that. It's a 1:02, so 0.6 of a second improvement for Matt Daly. Still very much in with a shout here of battling at the very end of this race, at least. I think what we're seeing now is the tyres haven't given up too much, but the fuel loads have got a lot lighter. So much of this lap is spent at wide open throttle, and there are plenty of laps as well. I think it's a fairly high fuel usage track, is the Oulton Park circuit. So the fuel loads have really substantially dropped now, and we're seeing the times tumble for the front runners here. This could be an exciting battle between our two drivers. Of course, we're going to have plenty more exciting battles. I'll try that again. I'm really mumbling my words tonight. I'm really messing up. But in the next few minutes, of course, we'll have the reverse grid race for race 2, our final race of the season. So don't go anywhere for that one, ladies and gentlemen. And of course, reverse grid means that the top 7 drivers have their positions from race 1 completely inverted. So the podium end up in the bottom few positions, and the driver in P7 ends up starting the race in first position. So that adds a little bit more intrigue into the racing for us, as we head now just over 5 minutes to go. Now making it about 7 minutes really, and there's only 3 seconds separating Matt Daly and Jack Hodson. The time seems to be fairly consistent now. The time advantaged towards Matt Daly seems to be fairly consistent at around 0.6 of a second. Needs about 5 laps to do it. I say he's in with a good shot here. Let's see. 18 laps into the race already, just a few more, and they're arguably the most important laps for Matt Daly. I'd say most important after lap 1. Let's not forget, all of this wouldn't have been possible if he didn't have a fantastic lap 1 performance and make up a good few positions. Alan Matthews, our race leader, lapping very nicely indeed. 1 minute 0.2 on his previous lap. Fastest car out on track on the previous lap. Just been eclipsed though by Matt Daly actually, who now goes with a 1 minute 0.2 of his own, and now only 2.5 seconds separating him and Jack Hodson. And here we see Alan Matthews has some lapped traffic of his own to contend with. It is Paul Millman just in front of him there. As we go on board now with Rosie Oliver. Rosie Oliver, a lap down then in the end this race, not working out the way that she would have wanted. I thought she was in with a good shout here, but maybe the reverse grid race has some more hopes for her. Meanwhile, at the front end of the field, it is that battle between Jack Hodson and Matt Daly that we wait for with bated breath. And now it is Matt Daly in the rear view mirror of Jack Hodson. Just 1.5 seconds separating them now, with around about 4 or 5 laps to go in this race. The fight is, I'd say, the fight is on. Now it's up to Matt Daly to try and pressure, to try and force a mistake from Jack Hodson, and it's on Jack Hodson to try and not crack under that pressure and keep the track position as we get back onto the start-finish straight once again and head into that first right-hander. The Lodge corner is not the first right-hander, of course. It is the Old Hall corner. I promise I know where I am on the lap. You think I'd know. It's quite simple, really. It's just basically a big circle with a little bit of a bit on the end for the Cascades, but apparently not, as that is an impressive corner. Well, I'm not going to say corner court in case the viewers are watching. I'm going to say a little bit of landscaping by Jack Hodson as he tries to get the best time out there, tries to get as close as possible to those curbs. And I had a pretty nasty experience actually in the last Sunday fun race with a curb. So I've been thoroughly enjoying actually taking part in the Sunday fun races, and maybe, you never know, you might see one on at the stream. I try and do some commentary and racing at the same time, because Lord knows that'll end well. But we were running at Yas Marina in a little bit of a, shall we say, prototype testing run of one of next year's cars. It was going very well. I think we all enjoy next year's car, that next year's prospective car. And I was heading out of the chicane at Yas Marina and clipped the curve ever so slightly. It set my force feedback off. And I'm slightly worried for this stream as well, actually, because what happened is the force feedback went off and my system blue screened immediately. And after much kind of hunting around, so, you know, on my drivers for my racing wheel broke. No, in the end what it was is that when I did my graphics card upgrade a little while back now, I didn't install my graphics card properly and it was ever so slightly loose in the PCIe slot. So what that meant is that when the force feedback jolted my desk, the graphics card became unseated and blue screened the PC. I'm sure there's going to be plenty of jolting though in the cockpit of Jack Hodson's car as we head now down towards that final corner once again. This time the battle is very much on though. And I'm really hoping my PC doesn't blue screen like it did at Yas Marina for this, because we certainly don't want to miss this. And it just goes to show really that technical issues can certainly happen in the world of sim racing as well as the world of real racing, because it was my own shoddy workmanship that caused it. But hopefully we don't see any shodding driving from these two now, because it's very tight, this part of the track, and anything could happen. Just over a minute to go. The fight is on. Only 0.2 of a second separating now. This is the battle, of course, for P2. Strong defensive line there from Jack Hodson. There's actually major contact between him and Matt Daly, but Jack, an impressive catch there. Opposite lock, is able to carry on, able to keep on the grey stuff, and Matt Daly is ever so slightly further behind than he was before. As we get back onto the start-finish straight once again, we see Matt Daly hunting for that inside line. Just 20 seconds to go on the timer now. And I'd say Jack Hodson has done a mighty impressive job of defending here. But can he defend for this one last lap? Now, as we head into the middle sector, heading into the Cascades once again, he's forced off the track ever so slightly. Maybe not off the track, but at least he's forced to be somewhere he doesn't want to be. And he certainly doesn't want to be in the grass and towards the infield there. And that is Matt Daly now up into P2, and 3 seconds down it is Jack Hodson. He held P2 for so long in this race. He defended it with so much gusto. Unfortunately for him, he's down in P3. It's Jack Hodson P3. Matt Daly climbing his way up to P2. What an impressive drive from the back end of the field it has been for Matt Daly so far. I think slightly out of his grasp is Alan Matthews, though, who starts the final lap of race 1 here at Oulton Park. And let's have a look at him now and celebrate what has been an almighty drive for Alan Matthews. I believe there's been another incident between Paul Millman and Rosie Oliver. Yes, there has. Very interesting. These two have managed to find each other on track once again. I thought this might not happen given the difference in tyres. Rosie seems to be a little bit down in pace, but it has happened. And now we enjoy another battle, this time for P5 on the final lap of this race, as Paul Millman tries to find a way past. We're on that final lap now, not long to go at all here. And heading into the final corner, and ideally for one last time in race 1, it is Alan Matthews, who qualified strong and has raced strong in race 1 so far, and comes home to take the race 1 victory. Congratulations, Alan Matthews, a strong race deserving of a championship victor there. Matt Daly then, an impressive drive comes to an end. P2 in the end, and I'm sure he's happy with that one. Paul Millman in the end just about wins out in front of Rosie Oliver. P5 and P6 for them, and commiserations to Jack Hodson. Well fought in the end and well held for so long. It is P3 rounding out the podium for Jack Hodson, and then commiserations also to Barry Clayton. Coming across the line, not a race that I imagine he wants to remember all that well, but still P4, some decent points in the end, and that rounds out race 1. As we have some victory donuts from Alan Matthews, which of course are customary, so thank you very much, Alan, for that one. That's not the usual way back to the pit lane. Oh no, it is. He's found his way back onto the track. The timing system just a small delay there, but there will be a small delay in commentary just for the next couple of minutes while we get ready for race 2, the reverse grid race, so don't go anywhere. And welcome back to the action, ladies and gentlemen. Just over 30 seconds now until lights out, and we have a slightly changed grid order. Of course, it is Barry Clayton, Jack Hodson on the front row here. Then we have, apologies, no, it's Steve Knight, Rosie Oliver, Paul Millman. Then we have Barry Clayton, Jack Hodson, Matt Daly, Alan Matthews, and then Guy Swarbrick to round out the running. Just over 20 seconds now for one final getaway here this season. As the revs begin to rise, it is 6 red lights on the gantry, and we are away. A slow launch as we're on board with Steve Knight there. Looks like he let off the clutch a little bit too hard, and there wasn't enough throttle there. The car just bogged on the getaway. So Rosie Oliver swoops in to P1 as there is big contact between Barry Clayton and Paul Millman, by the looks of things, I want to say. And that is Barry Clayton all the way down in P8. Not as arguably worse than race 1 really for him. That is a great shame, but he can still only lap 1, of course. He can work his way up. As we have Paul Millman in P3 on the medium compound tyres once again, so he feels that worked for him and he's going to stay on it. He has Matt Daly for company though, so I imagine he probably wants the softs at this point, maybe even the super softs, in order to try and keep Matt Daly at bay as we head now down through the middle part of the lap, and just one more straight to go before we're back at the start of the next lap. Matt Daly and Paul Millman making contact once again. Jack Hodson has had an off, as has Steve Knight by the looks of things, and that is a shame for Jack Hodson there. He had a strong drive in the first race and is going to have an even stronger one to take away some decent points in race 2. Meanwhile, Rosie Oliver leads with Matt Daly up into P2 now, and you have to wonder how long will it be until we see that battle for P1 commencing. It could be, I think, towards the end of this lap even. As we have a look now, it is Paul Millman against Alan Matthews. Alan Matthews having a look up the inside there. Paul making that Giulietta as wide as possible and doing a good job of it as well. It is a prime defensive part of the lap, really. You can usually put on a strong defence at this stage of the lap, with it being so narrow and it having so many kind of oscillations and curves in the so-called straight section. You can make defending a little bit easier, but we're seeing, there we are, Paul Millman using letting the track come to him and using that to his advantage there. We have a bit of a train actually forming up behind Paul Millman. It is Alan Matthews, then Guy Swarbrick, then Barry Clayton. Jack Hodson having another big off by the looks of things. That windscreen is completely toast by the looks of things. Rather like mine on my Mito at the moment. I blame the salt spreaders. As we get back on to the start-finish straight, and it is now, this battle of 4 has turned into a little bit of a battle of 2, but 2 battles of 2 at least, as we have now. It is Guy Swarbrick against Barry Clayton. Paul Millman has a big off on the first corner actually, so that allows Alan Matthews to break away somewhat in P3 at the moment. Matt Daly, meanwhile, has got ahead of Rosie Oliver, and that is why Rosie has had a big off. Where is that? The timing system appears to have gone down, unfortunately, so I can't quite tell you whereabouts we are. We're at Cascades. We saw her qualifying with it. We didn't see her qualifying with it. We saw her doing the opposite of that. We saw her struggling with it in qualifying. The entry of Cascades. It's at one of those high-speed kind of direction-changing braking zones that front-wheel drive touring cars with all the weight on the front end just don't like. And unfortunately, Rosie has become a cropper of that corner a couple of times so far this weekend. Maybe the setup she's running could be a little bit on the nose. Either way, unfortunately, she's dropped down to P6 from the lead of this race as a result, which is a great shame. Matt Daly, meanwhile, now leads this race with Alan Matthews in P2. 4.5 seconds down. Let's see, out of these two, of course, leading race 1 in the end. Let's see how their battle might be going on later on in this race. 4.5 seconds separate them at the moment. We'll be watching that gap with a keen eye to see can our 2 championship contenders enjoy one last battle this season. Meanwhile, all of the chaos of this race with Barry Clayton down in P5, Guy Swarbrick has found himself in P3, so we had a disastrous and rather unfortunate race 1, and things are looking a little bit brighter so far in race 2. Currently running in 3rd. Let's hope he can maintain that position. It'd be nice to see Guy come away with another podium to add to his roster for all his hard work this season. Paul Millman, meanwhile, side by side with Barry Clayton. Barry Clayton, who has the inside line there. Later on the brakes, Classic overtaking move there. Onto the start-finish straight we go, with Barry Clayton up into P4. So Guy Swarbrick's podium hopes might be a little bit dashed here, because Barry Clayton seems to be on a bit of a roll, seems to be on a decent charge here, and is now up into P4 already, given he ended lap 1 all the way down in near enough last place. This is certainly a strong drive so far from Barry Clayton. It was in race 1 as well, just unfortunately things weren't to be in the end. Meanwhile, Rosie Oliver has recovered from her off before and is comfortably lapping now in P6, just ahead of Steve Knight there in P7, and unfortunately in last position with quite a margin, Jack Hodson. Jack Hodson about 30 seconds down, and I'm not sure what's going. He seems to be jumping around the track a little bit. I can see his connection seems to be a little bit weaker than everyone else's at this point in time, so I don't know if he's having some unfortunate technical issues that are out of his control. But he's currently running in P8 as a result. On board now with Alan Matthews, who's just set a purple Sector 1. That was a 47.1, beating Matt Daly by 5,000ths of a second. So let's watch this lap. We're already into the 59s, I should mention. It's happened just 5 minutes into this race. And Alan is currently lapping quicker than Matt Daly. When I say quicker, I mean 100th of a second quicker. So they are matching each other in terms of pace at the moment, which is certainly enjoyable to watch, but isn't very, I am sure, enjoyable for Alan Matthews, who'd rather be beating him in terms of pace so that he can bring that fight for another race victory this season. Meanwhile, we're seeing a fight for another podium this season for Barry Clayton as we head now down towards Druids Corner. And it is Barry Clayton just behind Guy Swarbrick here, only by about a 10th of a second, looking, darting across the track rather, seeing where he might be able to make his Giulietta fit, puts a nose up the inside, but well defended by Guy Swarbrick there. Guy's always been relatively competent on the defence, I'd say that seems to be one of his stronger points. I think maybe gets into his own head, or maybe just is, when he really pushes, it just seems to go a little bit wrong sometimes. And the odd mistake creeps in like that. Very small lock-up into the first corner. And it's down into P4 for Guy Swarbrick. And Barry Clayton now up into P3. That chance at the podium that he didn't get in race 1, it looks like he could be getting here in race 2. As we have Guy Swarbrick there. An interesting lock-up, really. I think that was only a two-wheel lock-up at first, but it caused the entire car to step out. He has been able to get back on the loud pedal, but now he's potentially under pressure from Paul Millman here. We didn't get to see too many comparisons between these two, of course, because of Guy's early race 1 incident. So let's see how these two fare in battle. Paul Millman on the last lap, a 1 minute 1.9, Guy Swarbrick a 1 minute 1.4, but I suspect that lap wasn't the most representative that we've seen from Paul Millman just yet. Meanwhile, out at the front end of the field, as you can see there, new fastest lap of the race from Matt Daly. In fact, that's a lie. It's not the new fastest lap of the race, but only by 1,000th of a second. Alan Matthews, 59.979, Matt Daly, 59.980. So they are very close indeed, as we have another lock-up for Guy Swarbrick there. Potentially a bit too much brake bias to the rear of the car. And has been able to dispatch of Paul Millman, has Guy Swarbrick. In the background there, we also see Rosie Oliver not too far behind at all. She's still potentially in the mix here, and Barry Clayton, having cleaned his way past Guy Swarbrick, is now lapping comfortably. Is quicker than the midfield, is not quite on the pace of the two front runners, so is looking rather good at this stage of the race, it must be said. as we go on board with Paul Millman running on those medium compound tyres, of course. Let's have a look at their pace now. Rosie Oliver and Paul Millman, 1 minute 2.1 for Paul, 1 minute 1.4 for Rosie. So it seems to be at this stage the soft compound tyre, the one that you want to go on. Paul Millman actually the slowest driver out on track at this stage of the race. In terms of their best laps as well, Rosie Oliver dipping into the 1 minute flat region, whereas Paul Millman high 1 minute ones. So the medium compound tyre not working out, unfortunately, for Paul. Who knows? Again, I wasn't looking quite as closely as perhaps I should have. Maybe towards the very end of the race we see a turnaround in pace, and that could make the difference, of course. As we head into that first corner, it's a big, wide moment for Paul Millman there, just tried to carry too much speed in there. He saw he cranked all the front axles that he could, but the car did not want to respond. Maybe a little bit too late on the brakes there. Not to be outdone though, Rosie pretty much matches him there, as we have. That's Barry Clayton! It's Barry Clayton with a big off on the infield heading into Cascades there. I wonder if that was the old Cascade trap of just the back end just swapping out on you. Not sure. Either way, that's Barry Clayton now down into P6. I was not expecting that. I thought he seemed to be looking quite comfortable here. Now he's down into P6. Rosie Oliver, Paul Millman up into P4, P5 respectively. And this is Rosie's chance now to use those soft compound tyres, while Paul Millman is preoccupying Barry Clayton to break away and try and cement P4 in this race as we get back onto the start-finish straight once again. And Guy Swarbrick is up into P3. In terms of their pace at the moment, Rosie's actually lapping faster by a decent margin as well. It's over 1.2 seconds a lap faster than Guy Swarbrick is. So let's see now, with 3 seconds separating them, as Barry Clayton does in fact get past Paul Millman, so this might be all a moot point. Can Rosie fight for another podium here? Let's see. As we go on board with Barry Clayton, then he's trying his utmost to undo his unfortunate incident from before. He's about 4 seconds down on Guy Swarbrick, who holds the position that he held just a lap ago. So let's see what Barry can do. Certainly not making life easy for him at this phase in the race, really. As we go on board with Matt Daly, a 46.8 sees one of the, I think, strongest first sectors that we've seen so far all weekend. Purple, of course, and a very strong best lap as well, a 59.7. Again, that would have been pole in qualifying, and we're only halfway through the race. On board at the moment then with Rosie Oliver side by side with Barry Clayton. She ran a little bit wide as we head round into Cascades, and Barry, I think, has just replicated the incident that saw him drop down to P6 before. Just maybe catching the inside, kind of the grass on the infield of the circuit there upsets the car enough while you're under braking that it kind of swaps back around on you as you try to correct it, and that is a disaster for Barry Clayton. What is going on there? That is just, it's a little bit uncharacteristic. And unfortunately, halfway through this race, it's dropped him back down once again into P7. Now that is, I'm sure, just one of the most glorious sights that Rosie Oliver could have seen, for Rosie Oliver at least. As she now is in P4 with 4 seconds to catch up to Guy Swarbrick. Has 3 seconds to Paul Millman behind her, so doesn't have to worry too much about Paul. She knows she's got a bit more pace on hand in comparison to Paul, and can instead focus on trying to catch up to Guy Swarbrick. Guy Swarbrick has picked up the pace a little bit since we mentioned him before. 1 minute 1.7 on the last lap now. Rosie Oliver in the 1 minute 2s. I suspect because she was battling with Barry. So in the next couple of laps, we're going to have a cleaner idea as to whether or not a battle for the podium is on the cards for Rosie Oliver. If not, I'm sure we'll all be very pleased to see Guy Swarbrick with a shout at the podium here. What a lovely and cathartic ending I think it will be to the season to see Guy Swarbrick come home with a podium, if that is possible. The soft compound tyre in his car looking like it's not the happiest in the world as he headed round Druids then. We saw him have to kind of saw at the wheel almost to get some sort of a response from it. I can tell you Jack Hodson is actually currently lapping on the super... Oh, no, not super soft compound tyre, that's number 55. I'd like to point out, I didn't make that mistake. Didn't make that mistake with Guy before. He was running the super soft compound tyre, but I've just looked at the wrong part of the timing screen and said, oh, he's running the super soft tyre to Jack Hodson. He's not. He's running the soft tyre, as you can see there. but he's running the number 55, of course, which in my mind is 2 S's. He's currently fastest out on track. It's just a purple sector 2, which I believe he did in qualifying as well. So Jack Oulton clearly a fan of that final sector. Clearly able to nail the exit out of that last corner. But down in P8 as he does so, unfortunately for him, which is a shame given the heights of race 1. But we're going to go on board at the moment with Paul Millman. Paul Millman potentially under pressure here from Barry Clayton. Paul, of course, slowest driver out on track at the moment. Barry Clayton about 3 seconds lap faster as it stands. So this should be easy pickings for Barry Clayton at this stage of the race as we get back onto the start-finish straight now. We're expecting speeds of about 120 miles an hour at the end of the start-finish straight. One of the faster parts of the lap as Barry Clayton, late on the brakes, up the inside, textbook move once again. Doesn't even have to go off the track too much to secure it. And is able to get back up into P5. That's not, of course, the most comfortable sight in the standings for Rosie Oliver. She will now see, I imagine with some type of HUD system, whatever app she's running in the car, she'll now see that her next rival is Barry Clayton, and we know Barry Clayton got some good pace underneath him, so let's see how this battle unfolds. We mentioned, of course, having a look at the battle between Rosie and Guy. I can tell you that they are matching each other in terms of pace at the moment, so Guy seems to be in decent control of his race at this point in time. We're only 10 minutes to go. I know that's commentator's curse, so I wish I hadn't said it, but things are looking good, and the things are rather strong actually for a few drivers in this race. We're just under 10 minutes to go. Everyone seems to have managed their own race relatively well, with the odd mistake here or there. And I think that'll be a fairly good kind of sum up of the whole season, really. Everyone seems to read 2023 has been the year where I've taken a step back and go, wow, we've got some really good racing going on this year, and some great battling, some great driving on display. Unfortunately, one of those displays isn't. Barry Clayton once again at the Cascades. Got a feel for him. It's just a corner he is not happy with at all this evening. I wonder if he's running any damage on the car, or if something's going on in the cockpit of that car. That is just really unfortunate for him. He drops back down to P7 once again. That must spur both Paul and Rosie on. As Rosie's looking more like now it will be at least a solid P4. We saw her front axle starting to give up somewhat as well. Just 8 minutes to go in this race. Hopefully, I think it'll now be a case for a couple of drivers try and limp it back home. Now, what we're seeing here is Steve Knight gaining on Paul Millman now. Some decent pace in Steve Knight's car this weekend so far. He wasn't able to show it in race 1, a race to forget. Qualifying was strong for him, so that makes that a shame, but he might be making up for it here in race 2 now. Paul, we know, of course, lacking for pace in stages of this race, and now we have Steve. Yeah, just look at the amount of front axles have to put in order to make it around the corners. That must be tiring, but we see Steve Knight trying to put the pressure on here. Actually one of the faster parts of the lap. Now we'll be on board with Rosie Oliver because she's not gaining on Guy Swarbrick, but is able to break away ever so slightly, at least, from Paul Millman behind. She's just headed through the entry to Druids. That is the fastest part of the lap, at 130 miles an hour. So, high-speed circuit is this layout of Oulton Park. Well, all of this been going on in the midfield, I feel like I should mention the battle between the two front runners. We thought it maybe could have happened. Matt Daly, of course, a strong pace. Likewise, Alan Matthews, a strong pace, but matching him, not beating him. And I have to say, they've run their race very good at the front end of the field. The margins hardly extended. Alan Matthews has been able to control that pace. He's under the 1 minute margin at the moment, but just unfortunately for him, hasn't been able to catch. Go back on board with Paul Millman and Steve Knight. Then we are heading down into the Druids corner, that high-speed part of the lap, and that is the danger of a high-speed part of the lap. Just a little bit, I'm not going to say early braking for Paul Millman. I just don't think Steve Knight was expecting Paul to brake where he did. Maybe Steve was trying to go late on the brakes, and that just didn't work, unfortunately for him. And that is Steve Knight in the gravel, and Paul Millman who's been able to recover relatively well, but has unfortunately, for him, been overtaken by Barry Clayton. I'm sure that's a blessed relief for Barry Clayton. With about 7 laps to go in this race, he'll be trying his best to catch up to the likes of Rosie Oliver, although they are very similar in terms of pace now. We're in a bit of a stalemate part of the race now, where everyone seems to be around the 1 minute 1 region, apart from those 2 front-running cars. Steve Knight, unfortunately, drops back to last position, which goes to show that Jack Hodson, it's certainly not worth quitting early on, because he's quietly got back out on track, has been punching in some really aggressive lap times the entire race, and he's been rewarded for it somewhat. Look at him, he's now no longer in last position. And speaking of positions, let's have a look at the championship standings then, and congratulate once again, as we will do at the end of this race, at the end of this season, our championship victor here, Alan Matthews, who will take the championship. 245 points to his name. Yes, so Alan Matthews with 245 points to his name. Then we have Matt Daly in second after, this is of course the standings after the first race, 217 points. Then we have Will Inglis, unfortunately not here this evening, 186 points to his name. Barry Clayton will be taking the top of the midfield accolade in the end with 140 points to his name. Then we have Jack Hodson P5, who will win out against Andrew Brammer in the end. Paul Millman will potentially not, in fact should just about win out against Rosie Oliver. Let's see how the end of this race concludes in their battle in the championship. 83 points to Paul Millman, Rosie Oliver 77. Then we have Guy Swarbrick in P9 with 50 points, so this could be a really strong race for Guy Swarbrick's championship standings. Unfortunately, it won't be enough to jump a position. Then we have Andy Craig, Paul Brady, Steve Knight. Steve Knight could be making another point or 2 here based on how the end of this race goes, and maybe jumping a position up. And that includes all of our full-time drivers in the series, as we have Paul Millman that was Paul Millman and Jack Hodson having a bit of a moment there, both having a bit of an off, and Paul Millman tumbling back down towards P7, unfortunately for him. So this makes it looking a little bit more hopeful for Rosie Oliver. What would absolutely seal it is if Rosie is able to get ahead of Guy Swarbrick. Now there's only a second half separating them with about 4 laps towards the end of this race. Let's have a look at their pace in a moment. So 1 minute 1 flat on the last lap for Rosie Oliver, and a 1 minute 1.6 will make that a 1 minute 1.7 for Guy Swarbrick on the last lap. So again, just like we had between Barry Clayton and Matt Daly. Apologies, just like we have between Jack Hodson and Matt Daly, could we have a last lap battle for position here? It's not looking quite as hopeful for Rosie Oliver's sake, but even so, I think between Rosie Oliver and Guy Swarbrick, I think we'd be both pleased to see either one of these drivers get a podium at this stage in the season. It would be very nice indeed for both of them, and thoroughly deserved. As we have Matt Daly just now approaching some lapped traffic to contend with. Quite a lot of lapped traffic actually. There's 3 cars occupying the same corner complex in front of him, so hopefully he is able to navigate those without too much worry, because with 3 minutes to go in this race, 3 laps to go rather. Let's not forget, it's only 6 seconds separating him and Alan Matthews. It's certainly not insurmountable if an incident is involved, so these 2 back markers in front, that are Steve Knight and Paul Millman, are battling it out in front of each other. It looks like Paul Millman has won out this time around, so Matt Daly wants to be doing his utmost to not get involved in that, of course, as we get back on to the action between Rosie Oliver and Guy Swarbrick, and it is Guy Swarbrick who still leads this battle as we head down once again towards Druids. Here we are. 120 miles an hour then, 130 miles an hour in just a moment. Who's going to be later onto the brakes? There's less than a second separating these 2. Guy left it as late as possible, actually locked up as a result, and now the run down towards the final corner, the large corner, just to go on this lap before we have a couple laps to go in this race. 8 tenths of a second now as we get back on to Deer Leap here. Looks like Matt Daly has been able to navigate some of that lap traffic and navigate it a little bit clearly. Oh no, has he? I see a car spinning around there on the graphics. No, that is absolutely fine. That was just a little bit close for comfort there between Steve Knight and between Steve Knight and Matt Daly here. Guy Swarbrick still ahead of Rosie Oliver. 6 tenths of a second separating them now. We have so little to go in this race. It's pretty much now or never now for Rosie Oliver in our final few minutes of this series. Can you believe it? 8 rounds have absolutely flown by. 8 rounds, 16 weeks, half a year, near enough. And I have, well, 4 months. And I have thoroughly enjoyed every single session of it. It has been some brilliant racing. I have finished, in 2020, especially the second half of 2023, in both the touring car and the singles heaters, I've finished pretty much every single race weekend with a sore throat, and that is a fantastic thing. That is a fantastic problem to have, because it means we've just had some utterly brilliant racing. Hope you've enjoyed watching along as much as I've enjoyed commentating for this season, because we get to see some brilliant action like this. The timer now hitting 0, as we have the delta hitting pretty much 0 between these two drivers now. As we see, we're currently on the penultimate lap of this race. Matt Daly is onto the start-finish straight, getting ready to start that final lap, of course, heading into Cascades. It's caused so many issues in the past for Rosie. She navigates it cleanly this time round. And we head down towards Druids Corner once more. These two haven't been lapped, of course, so this won't be the final lap. They are on the penultimate lap for these two drivers. A big lock-up for Guy Swarbrick there, just as he has been for pretty much most of the weekend, really. He has been locking up, as we'll have Paul Millman. In fact, no, that'll be Steve Knight coming across the line first, I believe. No, it will be Paul Millman coming across the line first. But here we are, they're heading around that final corner. Rosie gets a better run through, but it's not going to be enough in the end. And Guy Swarbrick is just about able to keep in front in this very close battle as we head into that first corner. Once again, a tighter line for Rosie this time round, but we have to go on board with Matt Daly, who heads around the final corner for the final time, for the final race of this season. What a season it has been, and it's rounded out with a Matt Daly victory. Congratulations, Matt. A big handbrake turn as he crosses the line there. Not too far behind at all. Alan Matthews, our Race 1 victor and championship victor, of course. He takes the top trophy in the end and takes P2 in this race. Congratulations for a thoroughly deserved championship win, Alan Matthews. So then we have Paul Millman, who's crossed the line. Steve Knight will be crossing the line next. Rosie Oliver gets ahead of Guy Swarbrick. And why is that? At the very last moment, Guy Swarbrick through Druids is off the track. And unfortunately for Guy Swarbrick, his podium chances this season dashed as he drops down to P5. Then Rosie Oliver will just about in front of Barry Clayton, will come home with P3, rounding out the podium. A fantastic podium in the end for Rosie Oliver. Barry Clayton, strong recovery, comes home P4. Guy Swarbrick, commiserations there, comes home with P5 in the end. What a shame for him after a fantastic race. I think best race we've seen so far this year from Guy Swarbrick, as we have Jack Hudson going P6 in the end. What a race weekend to round out a fantastic season. The 939 Corse Touring Car UK Championship has been utterly fantastic to watch along. A deserving victor in the end, of course, Alan Matthews taking the trophy, with Matt Daly P2, and then Will Inglis, unfortunately not here this evening, coming home P3. Jack Hudson in P4. In fact, no, Barry Clayton P4, apologies. And now it's time for some victory donuts. The most important victory donuts of the season, of course. We watch gracefully as the wild Alan Matthews celebrates his Touring Car Championship there with a gesture known as the reverse handbrake donut. Which is, of course, one of the very few ways you can get a front-wheel drive touring car to complete a donut. But what a worthy celebration of a fantastic season of racing. As we have a big burnout in the end to celebrate as well. And of course, Rosie Oliver also partaking in the victory donut celebrations, and deservedly so as well, with that fantastic drive towards the podium. What a rollercoaster weekend it has been for her. she eventually comes home with that podium. And of course, we still await to see what the final point tally would be, but I believe that means she has usurped. In fact, she will have overtaken Paul Millman for P7 in the championship, so that was an important podium for Rosie Oliver. So, I hope you've enjoyed watching this season's worth of touring car action as much as I've enjoyed commentating it. It has been brilliant, and Alan Matthews comes away with that championship, of course. So from me, for the touring car action at least, it is a goodbye. We, of course, next week round out the seasons running at Yas Marina in the single-seaters, so you don't want to miss that. But at least for our front-wheel drive Giulietta companions here, it is a goodbye for now. Thank you very much for watching, and a good night.